Hello peeps, welcome back to Big Deck Playa with me, Matt Sparks. On today's show, we are taking a look at a Mage deck that's slightly different from what you would normally see on the ladder. Been seeing a lot of Flamewaker decks to rush your opponent down recently, but this is a new deck for a new season. This is called the Dragon Sage. So here's the deck. This is what we're looking at. This is a bit similar to the Paladin deck that I showed you the other week, in the sense that there's not too many doubles, there's quite a lot of single cards in there, which gives it quite a lot of versatility and proves to be quite a lot of fun. And it keeps your opponent guessing as well, which is quite nice. So let's start at the top and work our way down as we normally do. So we start off, we've got 2 mana worms because it's a mage deck and mana worms are awesome because you're going to be using spells. Not huge amounts of spells, but enough that the mana worms will be quite effective. At 2 mana we have a flame cannon. Now there's quite a lot of decent removal for mages with 2 mana. So flame cannon is one of them, and then the next card is frostbolt, which is also very good for removal. Comboing those with the mana worms buffs the mana worms, and it means you can do more damage. Also at 2 mana we have 2 unstable portals. Now these guys are pretty useful, comboing very nicely with the mana worm. We also have, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, which is, I don't normally do that, but I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. We do actually have 2 Flamewakers in this deck. So all these spells combo really nicely with the Flamewaker as well. So if you can get both a mana worm and a Flamewaker on the board whilst using these spells, then even better. But unstable portals are pretty good. You never know what you're going to get, but I like that kind of random aspect to it. Also at 2 mana, we have 1 Acidic Swamp Ooze. Seeing lots of warriors and paladins, and the occasional shaman that has a weapon, but it's not as often as paladins and warriors, so Acidic Swamp Ooze can be quite useful. You could, if you really wanted to, swap out the Acidic Swamp Ooze for a Harrison Jones, but obviously Acidic Swamp Ooze is like 3 mana less, which means early game you're not going to be able to do much with it, but at 2 mana it means you can play that and maybe something else as well. Also at 2 mana we have Nat Pagal, the first of a few legendaries in this deck. Now sometimes Nat Pagal can be awesome. Sometimes he can really do work for you. And I think in one of the video examples I have in the background, you'll see him going to work, and it's fantastic. But sometimes he doesn't do anything at all. And he's just sitting on your board, not really doing anything, and just taking up space on the board. At 3 mana we have some more card draw in the form of Arcane Intellect. We've only got the 1 of these, but because it's a spell it combos very nicely with Mana Worm and the Flamewaker. It's a no-brainer really, and because you're a mage deck you kind of want to include a bunch of spells in your deck. Playing a mage deck without any spells kind of defeats the point of it being a mage deck really, so you always want to include some decent spells in the deck. 1 Big Game Hunter, for obvious reasons, to get rid of anything big and scary, or anything that gets buffed. As I mentioned earlier, we've got the 2 Flamewakers, which after you cast a spell it deals 2 damage randomly split amongst all enemies. If you can get both of these bad boys out at the same time, then you're doing 4 damage randomly split across everything, and that can be an early win. It's not, I mean, this deck isn't the same as the mage deck that I featured a little while back, which had a lot of lower cost spells in it. I mean, it had stuff like Arcane Missiles and Mirror Image to benefit the special ability on the Flamewakers. So this one doesn't have that, because this one is more about getting some decent stuff on the board early game, and then bringing out some fairly big things a bit later. We have 2 Mind Control techs, 2 of them, which is unusual because most decks that I've played that have Mind Control techs in only have the 1. But I have found that Mind Control tech can actually be very, very useful, especially when you're up against decks that like to flood the board. 1 Echo of Medivh. Now you don't see Echo of Medivh played that often, It's usually just like the Freeze Mage that has the Molten Giants, or in a Mill Mage. I think I've seen it in a Mill Mage deck. But it's in this one. In the few games that I've played with this deck, I've played about 6 games I think, I haven't actually used it. There was one time where I could have used it because I had it in my hand, but I had too many cards in my hand because Nat Pagel was going to town. A Polymorph, transform a minion into 1/1 sheep. Again, combos very nice with the previous minions. Can get rid of something big and scary. Maybe something that's big and scary that has less than 7 attack that your big game hunter can't get rid of. We have 1 Defender of Argus to buff up things, to make them do more damage, and to give them taunt. Because there's no ice block in this deck, so having a Defender Argus to put out a couple of taunts real quick, maybe to slow your opponent down just a little bit, just until you get, I don't know, maybe a Flame Strike or something, could be really, really useful. Also at 4 mana we have 2 Hungry Dragons. Now this is where things start to get a bit more interesting, because we actually get dragons for a start, so that's good, because up until this point we haven't actually had any dragons. A 5/6 for 4 mana is amazing. The fact that it summons a 1-cost minion for your opponent isn't too much of an issue. If you play this turn 6, then there's a good chance that the 1-cost minion that your opponent gets from this, you can just use your hero power to ping and get rid of, and then it's not an issue anymore. 1 Antique Healbot for that little bit of extra health. Antique Healbots in general are pretty rubbish. 3/3 for 5 is not very good stats, but the extra 8 health can be really, really useful. If you're going to have a dragon deck, you need to have dragons in it. So we have 2 Azure Drake for some spell damage and a little bit of extra card draw, if you don't have enough already. Also at 5 mana we have 2 Blackwing Corruptors, so these do 3 damage, a bit like the Flame Elemental for Shamans. These do 3 damage, provided you have a dragon in your hand. The Flame Elemental for Shamans are a 6/5 for 6, so a 5/4 for 5, I guess, is the equivalent. 1 Sludge Belcher, because Sludge Belchers. It's pretty much, apart from whatever you use the Defender of Argus on, this is pretty much the only taunt, so you might want to use this to slow your opponent down somewhat. And then we move into some of the bigger, badder creatures. We have Toshli. Now you might be like, what? Toshli? Yes, Toshli. So you get a spare part card on Battle Cry and on his Death Rattle. So that's not too bad. A 5/7 for 6 is okay, I guess. But yeah, he's okay. But I think the main reason is the fact that you get 2 spare part cards out of him, which can obviously be used for Flame Wakers and Mana Worms and that kind of stuff. So that's probably why he's in there. If you don't want to put Toshli in there, or if you don't have Toshli, Harrison Jones, as I mentioned before, might be a worthy replacement. At 7 mana we have a Flame Strike. Try it if you can. If you're coming up against a Patron Warrior, you want to try and keep hold of this for sort of turn 8, turn 9. When they flood the board with their grim patrons, and then you can just go ha 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 and Flame Strike them all and get rid of all of them. Also at 7 mana we have Archmage Antonidas. Obviously combos very nicely with the spells. Toshli being turn 6 is quite late game, giving you 2 1-cost spells. So Archmage Antonidas can go out onto the board, and you've got these 2 spare part cards to give you 2 fireballs. Stuff like Toshli, Archmage Antonidas, your Sludge Belcher, your Antique Healbot, maybe even your Hungry Dragons. If you've got those on the board, you may want to use your Echo of Medivh to make copies of them and put them into your hand, provided you've got enough room in your hand. Because they're kind of integral to this deck, because they've got very special effects. Obviously Toshli and Archmage Antonidas have very special effects. The Sludge Belcher is the only one in the deck, so getting another one of those could be quite useful. And yeah, Antique Healbot, it's the only real heal in the deck as well, so that might be another one that you might want to get a copy of. And then last but not least we have Ysera. Ysera is very, very cool. She has spells that she can give you, which obviously combo very nicely with Archmage and Flame Waker and Mana Worm, making it all very, very cool indeed. It's a nice combo of cards. And getting an Echo of Medivh on Ysera would be pretty nice too, so having 2 lots of dream cards coming into your hand each turn could probably win you the game. So that's the Dragon Sage deck. I'm quite liking it. It's a lot of fun, and because it's quite versatile with all these different cards in, you never get the same type of game twice, which I really, really like. I really like it. I really like this deck. And if you are thinking of playing a Mage deck, and you want to play something that's not the current meta, then maybe try this deck out. If you do try this deck, as per usual, let me know how you get on. If you have any recommendations for future decks for this series, feel free to leave a comment below or link them to me via my Twitter, and I'll be sure to check them out. Otherwise, I shall leave you for this week, and I will see you next week for some more Big Deck Playa. Thanks very much for watching. Bye bye.